Ah, the 7 Years' War, the 9 Years' War, the French and Indian War, the Third Silesian War, the Pomeranian War, the Few Too Many Names War. No matter what you call it, it no doubt had an extreme impact on global history. The effects of this war can still be seen in our world today. This war led to the creation of the British Empire, the United Germany, and my home, the United States of America. The 7 Years' War is a complex war that deserves to be looked at in depth. The 7 Years' War, or World War Zero, is the war that led to the Europe that we all know and love today. You know, those cowardly French and ambitious Germans. So without further ado, Sardonic Vagabond presents the 7 Years' War. So let's jump right into this, shall we? It's 1748. You are Austrian Archduchess Maria Theresa. You have just fought a war over the legitimacy of your throne. You fight a war with France and Prussia that results in you being able to keep the throne. Wait a minute. Is that sexism? However, you lose the precious territory of Silesia to Prussia as a result. I hope you enjoyed those wonderful sound effects. Anyway, to make matters worse, your old ally, Britain, has chosen to cheat on you with your enemy, Prussia, as they see them as a better fit to protect Hanover, a territory under the rule of George II, the British king. In this classic game of two can play at that game, you have chosen to ally with Britain's enemy, France. Switching things over to the other side of the world, tension is building up between the French and British North American colonies. Long story short, the British built a fort on the border to flex, and this annoyed the British, who flexed even harder by sending fan favorite George Washington to go deal with the problem. Washington, who was very young at the time, ambushed a small French force at Jumonville Glen on May 28, 1754. The French retaliated by attacking British-controlled and ironically named Fort Necessity. The British, the heroes they were, abandoned the newly created fort. These skirmishes were the true beginnings of the 7 Years' War. Side note, when most people talk about the 7 Years' War, they are usually referring to the war as a whole. However, sometimes this is used to describe only the war in Europe. The French and Indian War, however, is used mostly to describe the war in the North American colonies. Learning is fun. Anyway, back in the mess that was Europe, Teresa's ambitions to retake Silesia were growing, as well as Russian ambitions to take East Prussia. This made Prussia extremely nervous as they were surrounded on all sides by enemies. Frederick the Great, King of Prussia, worried that an attack would come, so in order to gain momentum, Prussia decided to invade Saxony in 1756. This was done to get the Prussians momentum in order to invade Bohemia. The initial invasion was successful, however, it did not give Frederick the momentum he desired. This invasion is what began the war in Europe. The war had officially become transcontinental, and two opposing sides had formed. The Convention of Westminster was the coalition between Britain and Prussia. On the other hand, the Treaty of Versailles, not that one, was the coalition between France, Austria, and Russia. Crossing the ocean, once again, the tides began to turn in the colonial wars. The British government poured resources into the front. As a result, they did phenomenal in North America. However, they were not able to supply the Prussian allies with much aid, which mostly left the Prussians to deal with Russia and Austria, and to a lesser extent, France. Britain was able to cripple France's economy, however, by taking away their access to their North American colonies. So, thanks, Britain? On the other side of the world, another front was brewing, in India.
It's your big day! Incredible job! I know we had our differences, but today, I just want to tell you!
Hey, congratulations, it's a celebration, party all day, I know you've been waiting.
Anyway, the British East India Company, as opposed to the French and Dutch East India Company, wanted to feel special and make a name for itself and kick the other East India Companies out, in which they did, even though France had the support of the Mughal Empire, but that's a story for another time. Back in Europe, it's 1757, and the French move in to take Hanover, and the Austrians move in to take Saxony. Prussia is able to defeat the armies at Saxony. However, Austria was able to retake Silesia. To make matters worse on poor Prussia, Sweden, yes, Sweden, decided to invade northern Prussia, or Pomerania, hence the name the Pomeranian War. Also, yes, this is where the dog breed is from. Russia was also able to take control of East Prussia. The war was looking very bleak for Prussia. Russia and Austria were very, very close to wiping Prussia off the map. Until one day, when Jesus himself came down and saved Frederick the Great from catastrophe. As he calls it, the miracle of the House of Brandenburg, Russia and Austria failed to pursue the Prussian army, giving them time to regroup. Meanwhile, on the other side of the world, Britain was absolutely crushing the French in battle. Britain was able to get a major victory at the Battle of Louisbourg in 1758. I am not going to go into the specifics. However, just know that this battle allowed the British to take Quebec and effectively destroy France's chances of winning the war in North America. Along with splendid victories in North America, Prussia began to have some luck as well. Specifically, when Frederick the Great's rival, Elizabeth of Russia, kicked the bucket, and was succeeded by Peter III, the most German Tsar of Russia to ever exist. But, anyway, he signed a treaty with Prussia that brought Russia out of the war. For pretty much, no reason, and they gave all of this land that they had captured back, so not a great war strategy, kids. Sweden, believing that they also had nothing to gain from this war, also dropped out of the war. However, Spain joined the war in 1762 and went to war with Portugal. Portugal had been neutral as they had been hit with a devastating earthquake in 1755 and they had been trying to rebuild. The war was deemed the Fantastic War because even though few battles were fought, the Portuguese were starved their impolite tourists, causing huge losses to the Spanish army. Spain also began an invasion of Brazil through South America. Even with Spanish entry into the war, the British still dominated the North American region. As the war came to a close, Prussia had defeated all her enemies except for one, that crazy lady in Austria. The war would continue. However, Austria surrendered very, very quickly to the Prussian army. You wonder why they don't have that surrender rate label. As the war came to a close, the opposing sides began to sign treaties in which they planned to maintain for what I am sure is forever wink wink. The first two treaties, one being the Treaty of St. Petersburg and the other being the Treaty of Hamburg, brought Russia and Sweden out of the war respectively. These two treaties were signed before the last two treaties. The next two treaties, however, the first being the Treaty of Paris, this treaty was signed that basically gave up all of France's claims in North America to Britain and Spain. Spain gave Florida to Great Britain, and they retained control of Cuba. France regained the islands of Martinique and Guadeloupe and Saint Martin. This treaty was signed on February 10, 1763. The final treaty, the Treaty of Hubertusburg, was signed on February 15, 1763, only 5 days after the previous. This treaty included the notable recognition of Silesia under Prussian rule. This treaty was a treaty signed between Saxony, Austria, and Prussia. The 7 Years' War may have been a war started and fought for purely political and dynastic reasons. However, the 7 Years' War has led to many key events in the history of the world. The 7 Years' War led to America to revolt. The war led to the rise in Prussia and the decline of Austria. The 7 Years' War also led to the decline of France, which would famously lead to the Napoleonic era. Not to mention the political effects that carry into the 20th century. like Britannia rules the waves or British dominance in India. In conclusion, this conflict covered by a long and complex story led to some astronomical effects on our world as a whole. I think it's important to study history because it makes life like an open note test. We have the answers, we just have to care enough to find them. Because I also like to talk about historical idiots. But that's just me.